So once all the flats are laid down, then comes the next process, which is gradients. So how that works, I will have to just flat up something correctly for a minute. So what I will do is I'll just paste all that in grey, and I will select this helmet visor here. Now, if you are using the marquee tool to do your flats, remember to expand it again. You always want that marquee intersecting your lines, so you don't want it sitting on the edge of your line work, you want it in between. So I can see that's a thin line there, so I only expanded it by 2 pixels to be safe. Okay, so say this is going to be grey. It's a very boring bounty hunter at the moment, but for the sake of example, say this was all my flats done. So my flats are usually just the flat color. I'll flick over to the final image, and I'll show you what the flats look like on the final image. I just turn everything off. This is what the flats look like. Now turn off that green one. So it really is just flat color, no gradients, nothing else. You're just getting the base color that you're going to be using for each of the different sections. And why is that important? Because what we do then, flick back over to the bounty hunter here. Actually, I'll work on this one here, but seeing it is already colored. Now you can already see it here. If I turn that layer on, it's a gradient layer. Now, some people add gradients, some people don't. So again, personal preference. But the way that I do that is I take my flat layer and I drag it onto the new layer icon to duplicate it. Okay, so once it's been duplicated, I've got an exact copy of that. So now I've got 2 of them. I can hide and show as I need to. Now the next trick that you're going to do is you, just like we locked the transparent layer on our flats, I create what's called a layer mask. I'm fairly certain that's what it's called anyway. I know the shortcut is Command Alt and G. So you want to do that on the layer that you just duplicated. So I've done that, and then you'll see it change a little bit. So you'll see that you've got your flat layer at the bottom, and then you've got your duplicated flat layer with a little arrow. Now what that means is it's exactly like locking the transparency. You can see that this layer above doesn't have a lock transparency, but it does mean that if I do anything on it, it's not going to move outside of the base layer. Now that doesn't make a lot of sense when you're just doing gradients, because you've already got the flats already done, you've just duplicated the layer. But if I created a new layer and then hit Command Alt G, and you can see they can stack as well, it will layer mask to that base layer, which means that when I go to do shading, which is a completely different thing, you know, black brush, come in here, oh, wrong layer, wait for it to catch up, there we go, and I'm on that top layer there. See how I'm moving outside, and it's exactly the same as when we locked the transparency on our base layer. You can see that no matter what I do, I can't go outside of those edges, and that makes it a lot easier. So I'll undo that. So with gradients, I take that duplicated layer. The reason I duplicate the layer underneath is because I can then use my marquee tool to select the color blocks. So for here, I can see that maybe this red spot here, I would marquee that. And you've got to make sure you're on the gradient layer. So what I do now is I always lock my flat layer, because so many times I've done the gradients on the flat layer, and then you're in, again, a world of trouble trying to undo that. I'm going to press the G tool, and what I want to do is I want to get a default gradient. So flick it over to the black and white. It's the first one in the presets there. Always be that, and what that does is it goes on your colors that you have selected currently. I always have white as my secondary color, and I select the color which I'm currently gradienting, if that's a word, as my top layer. So you'll see over here it's now red to white. I do have reverse checked, but however you work with your gradients, you'll find whether reverse works for you or not. I have the G tool pressed, which is a gradient, and I click way off the section, so I'm going to click like way up here and drag it down, and you can see if you'll get it right. Now you don't want to be like this, because then that's too much white. You don't want to be like that, because there's not enough white, and you don't want to do short ones, because it's short little strokes, because it does create like a harsh line. So the way that I do it is nice soft strokes, and you get that nice soft gradient. And Sometimes you want it to be more subtle than others, and you know, some you want really harsh gradients, maybe like with a windscreen or maybe a visor. Most of the time you just want it to be nice and soft like that. As you can see, I've done that there, and I'll do another example on his mask. So G, and then I can press Alt, and same as when you're using the brush tool, always remember that Alt brings up your eyedropper. So I can automatically select it, and then use the marquee tool. So always getting that, always reselecting the color that we're gradienting with the Alt tool. So you can see that one a little bit harsher there, and then at the top there with the black. On G, Alt, and then that's a bit too much, and so you just feather it, and obviously Shift will make sure that your gradient stays in a direct, it's like a straight line, so that's always handy as well. So anyway, we'll hide all that, and I'll show you how it turns out. It looks like this when you're done. So you go through each different section. As you can see, some sections I don't do, but most of the time I manage to get the entire piece. Guns and anything sort of silver or chrome, I always have like a bit of a harsher gradient on it than normal. But again, it just sits inside that layer mask, and it means that we can't go outside of the lines, which makes it a lot easier. The next step is shading. Now shading is actually really easy. I create a new layer, layer mask it with Command Alt G. Sorry for any Windows users, I'm not entirely sure on the shortcuts, but it'd be fairly easy to translate. I can actually show you in the menu. If you do create a new layer and you don't want to use a shortcut, you can just go layer, and I believe it is layer create clipping mask. That's what it's called. It's called a clipping mask. So click create clipping mask, and that will clip it to that layer. So sorry, it's not a layer mask, it's the clipping mask. Now what I want to do then is I just hit B for my brush, select black, and I just want jet black, and then I go through and I shade where I need to. Now again, I'm not going to be able to do it while screen recording because it's just way too laggy, but obviously that's a little bit too dark and you can't see anything underneath it. So what I do is I go to my blending mode for the layer, and I select multiply from the drop down list, and then I drop my opacity of that layer usually down to 30%. 30% for quite dark shadows. Sometimes I'll go for 20% if it needs to be a little bit lighter, but generally 30%. So you can see that black now has become just a shadow, and I can fill that in, and again it doesn't go outside the lines because we have that clipping mask in place. Now through the power of computers, I can, there we go, this is the clipping this is the the shading that I've done. This is what it looks like if you take it outside of that clipping mask, put it back in. You can see that it all clips to those flat layers, and it means that none of it's outside the edges, which is awesome. After I've done the shading, I always do the highlights. So and all that is exactly the same process. You can see I turn that on there, but it's with a white brush, and the layer blending, the blending mode for the layer is set to soft light. The opacity is at 100%, white brush, and with the blending mode set to soft light. And you can see there, I only do it sort of not as much as the dark shadows. The highlights are a little bit softer. Now what I'm going to do is I'll roll back to the original, so we can have a look. So that's pretty much the process. Then from there I add a little bit of dinting into the armor. So that was all just paintbrush on a separate layer. Always work on separate layers so that if you do stuff up, it's very easy to roll back. You can just delete the layer and not lose any of your work. And then a few glows using gradients and blurs and all that sort of stuff. And then I also put some textures in as well. You would have seen me pull some textures in. There's textures I find from all around the place. I've got a library stored up of them. If I go to resources, textures, and open it up like this, so there's so you can see there is a ton of different textures in here, all different ones: bubbles, bark, checkerboards, all this different stuff. I got it from all around the place. You find it on different websites. A good website to go to is, I think, TextureZen, or Zen Texture. It's one or the other. That's got a great library of textures, so you may be able to pull a few out of there. A tip is always desaturate the texture. So you go to Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. That'll make it grayscale, and then you could drop it in and set. I usually set that layer mode to be a multiply layer mode or a luminosity. You can play around with your different blending modes there. But you can see that I do have some textures. So I've got one here which is multiply 20%. I crank that up full so you can see it is a dark texture. And if I turn off the multiply, oh, normal. So this is what it looks like normally. I set it to multiply, which basically removes the white from it, and that allows the black to stay. So you can see it looks a bit ashy and a bit beaten up and stuff like that. And then I just want it to be soft and gentle, so I set it to 20%, and you can still see it there, but it's not as harsh. So that's pretty much it, guys. Hopefully that helps a little bit, gives you a little bit of insight in the process that I go through in a broad sense. Now, if you guys do have any more questions or comments, feel free to fire them through to me, email or just in the YouTube comment section there. I do read them all, and I do respond to them all as well, including emails. I'm sorry if I've been a bit behind lately, but I do make an effort to respond to each of you personally. Now, if you haven't been to the website, it's inkbyte.net, www.inkbyte, I-N-K-B-Y-T-E, it's like a computer byte, .net. That's where you can see all the latest stuff, and also Facebook as well. Join us on Facebook, there's heaps of stuff going on there. That's facebook.com/inkbyte.art, or you can just search for Inkbyte and it should come up. I'm also on Twitter as well, inkbyteart, so come and follow me there. I will put all that in the comment section. But again, feel free to drop by there. Commissions, there is a few spots opening up in the next couple of weeks. So if you do want something done, jump in now. Send me an email. Say register some interest there. Super cheap. I'm doing figures now for $70, and for that you get the high-res artwork, your character, whatever you like, add-in characters, whatever you want. So feel free to drop me an email and we can discuss that further. And also the store.inkbyte.net. You can get this print along with a whole heap of other ones as well that you like up there. Again, thanks guys for everything. Thanks for all the kind comments. Keep them coming, and I'll see you guys in another video sometime soon. Catch ya.